Hello, welcome to Insiders on Background. The idea of this new podcast is to dig a little deeper into an issue that we're going to be covering on Sunday morning, give you a bit of a sense about how we go about gathering information, getting our head across something that is certainly part of the debate, something that we're going to be discussing on the couch. And today, I'm in the seat of Dunkley, where a by-election is going to be happening on the 2nd of March. This is a seat in the outer southeast suburbs of Melbourne. It's a seat that Labor won at the last election with a margin of just over 6%. The sitting member here for Labor, Peter Murphy, sadly died from cancer, causing this by-election. It's the sort of seat that Peter Dutton has in his sights as part of his strategy to win these outer metropolitan seats from Labor. It's also therefore the very seat that Labor needs to hold as well, certainly if Anthony Albanese wants to continue with the momentum that he showed at the start of this political year. A lot will hinge on what happens here in this by-election. So what's on the mind of the voters here in Dunkley? We caught up with a few of them. What's the biggest issue, do you reckon, for you guys in this by-election?
The biggest to do with the probably...
Spiralling costs of everyday living, I think.
Yeah.
I'm a mum to a young 20-month-old, so cost of living is very important to me.
The land rates and the general well-being of the Frankston area has always been a lot better under the Labor government.
Housing affordability, making rentals.
So the most important issue for me was to actually just, recognise the legacy of Peter Murphy.
So how would you describe Anthony Albanese, the Prime Minister?
Look, he seems a very approachable man. I wouldn't be in his shoes for all the tea in China.
He's in a position which is hard to back up after the last 3-4 years we've had, so anybody in that position would still be struggling today.
I feel he hasn't done enough. I feel like he made a few promises. I probably can't give you any examples, but he made a few promises to get elected, and he's broken a few of his promises, I believe.
He doesn't tell the truth. He's always twists things. Just doesn't come across as a nice guy. Genuine, yeah, exactly.
And what about Peter Dutton? What do you make of him?
Not much.
I think he's just a little bit of a muckraker at the moment, yeah.
Excellent. He's very good on border control.
I think he's got a good head on his shoulders. He might not look good on the camera, so to speak, but I think he's got good policies.
Yeah.
I don't really know too much about him, to be honest. Anything would be better than Anthony Albanese at this stage.
So for a more professional read of what's going on in this electorate, I'm joined by two people who do this sort of thing for a living. Samaras and Tony Barry used to run campaigns against each other here in Victoria, but they both now are with Redbridge, and it's lovely to be sitting here with you in Frankston South on this warm late summer's afternoon. Let's start by talking a little about where we are and what this seat is made up of, because give us a bit of a breakdown of the sort of seat we're in, Dunkley.
The seat's basically in two halves. You've got the wealthy southern end, which is Mount Eliza. It's where the Liberal Party generally does a lot better. And you have what we will define as Carrum Downs, which is the northern part of the electorate, which is mortgage belt, lower to middle income, along with Frankston North. Basically, they're the two sort of spheres of the electorate.
And we're kind of on the dividing line where we are.
That's
here.
right, correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's the north where on election I will be looking at in terms of whether there's going to be any volatility in the Labor vote, because that's where I would expect swings to occur, if they're going to occur.
Okay, and we'll come to that.
Yeah.
But Tony, just on how you would describe this seat, it is the typical outer metro seat that we often see swing at election time, the sort of seat that Peter Dutton is really talking about targeting.
Yeah, this is the first real litmus test for the Liberal Party and Peter Dutton on their repitching of the party to outer-suburban. Dunkley is very much outer-suburban, and it's, as Cos said, it includes sort of high growth areas of Sandhurst and Skye and those sort of areas, and then your more established higher income areas down the southern part of the electorate. And then Frankston itself is the political centre of gravity, which is where the commercial activity is of the seat.
So you guys have been running focus groups, talking to people in this seat, and yes, there are different parts of it, but what are you picking up as the main issues likely to influence their votes, Cos?
I think the electorate is extremely disinterested in the by-election.
Right.
disengaged.
That's pretty normal though at a by-election,
It's
or
pretty
is it
normal.
particular disengagement?
Yeah,
this
the
time?
disengagement with politics in general is a growing trend across the country, but also I would say increasing angst towards Canberra, and so it really isn't. When we talk about the volatility in the vote, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be beneficial for Peter Dutton. We probably will see the other vote grow significantly at this by-election and in other seats similar to it at the next election.
I mean, people can be switched off from what the politicians are saying, what the media is saying, and yeah, that's absolutely a trend. But they still vote.
They do.
So what are the issues, even if they're not consuming the daily political news? What are the issues that are most on their minds?
I think to Coz's point, the other vote was 27% in Dunkley at the last general election. The national average was just over 31%. I'll be keeping an eye on the by-election night on the other vote. I think there's going to be a big fragmentation towards that away from the major parties, consistent with what Coz was saying. And I think what's driving or fueling that drive to the other vote is this disillusionment, this a breakdown in trust in the institutions, whether it be corporate, political or media. And also, look, I think Albanese's stage 3 tax cuts, which is now being branded locally, I noticed as Labor's tax cuts. It has in our research taken some of the sting out of the cost of living issue. They don't, in the focus groups in Dunkley, they don't define this by-election as a referendum on cost of living.
Well, that's got to be welcome news for Labor, right? Because you would expect that could have easily been a cost of living by-election, but you're saying that it's been neutralised?
Yeah, look, every decision you make in politics is a risk versus reward proposition. The reward for Albanese was he's got something to speak to, he's back in the conversation, and the risk, of course, is questions about his trust. Now, there are certainly, in our quantitative and qualitative research, there are some emerging concerns this might be the start of a trend. But I think the reward at this stage is paying off for Labor. He's got something to talk about, he's got something to campaign on, and I think, he's now defining himself as being, listening to the concerns of self-reporting low and middle income earners, because prior to this they were feeling they weren't getting listened to, that he was absorbed in this esoteric constitutional debate, and now they're sort of the view that, it's probably not going to be much financial gain for me, but he's listening.
Yeah, would you agree with that, Coz, that as disengaged as many might be, this has penetrated this, maybe not the detail of who gets what, but the idea that the government's doing something on cost of living?
It doesn't take much for a Labor Party in power, let's say federally in this situation in Melbourne, to convince them to go back to voting for Labor.
Right, it's a natural instinct.
It's a natural instinct. They were reluctant, I would say, potential protest vote before the tax cut announcement. They clearly had a lot of angst towards the incumbent Labor government because it was preoccupied on other issues except for their own financial affordability challenges they're facing in their own kitchen table and household. So the move away from the Labor over to Dutton in Melbourne has always been soft. So it would not have taken much to move it back.
Bring it back.
That said, we really don't have a really clear insight as to what that sort of Carrum Downs heavily mortgaged. I mean, 80% of borrowers in Carrum Downs are suffering from negative cash flow, and we have yet to see what that looks like at the ballot box. We're going to get a preview of that, and that's important because there are at least 12 other seats that Labor holds that are demographically and geographically much more challenging than Dunkley. So,
I mean, you talk about those mortgage rates, and we've had 12 interest rate rises since the election. It'll be quite something if Labor can avoid punishment directly because of that. What about some other issues? We often talk about in the daily political contest, whether it's housing, immigration, even the war in Gaza. Is any of that, do you think, going to be an issue in this by-election?
No, cost of living and its relationship to housing still remains, the political fault line in Australia, and is driving all the voter considerations right now. Problem is they're not seeing answers from the major parties. As I said, they're seeing now some signs that Albanese is at least listening to those concerns, so there's a bit of reward in that. But when you've had 12 interest rate rises, the reward might be very small. There might be some preference flows, but that is still driving the political debate.
What about immigration? It's been a focus the last couple of weeks. Is that an issue at all here, or not really registering?
Well, immigration is an issue in a more broader sense when it comes to housing affordability, housing attainment. People being able to get into
people are blaming the immigration intake.
One of the reasons they cite as to what's creating the stress. That is very different to boat people. I think boat people as a political issue is something that's not going to resonate like it used to in the past.
You reckon that's changed?
Yeah, it's very much what we would define a post-material preoccupation. In other words, you have to be doing pretty well in life to be voting on that issue alone. But immigration is a different story, because there's a perception out there within certain communities across the country, including this electorate, that immigration is compounding the housing problem.
Now, in terms of the candidates, and we should include in this Peter Murphy, of course, this by-election caused by the very sad death of Peter Murphy. She was a pretty popular local member, and probably better known, do you think it's fair to say, than a lot of local members tend to be. We all have heard the figures on what the typical swings are. It can be a bit different at a by-election when the sitting member has died, because it's not like voters are angry that someone's pulled the pin after just being elected. This is a bit different, and clearly Labor are trying to present their candidate, Jodie Bellier, as continuing the legacy of Peter Murphy. Is that the right strategy, do you think, Tony?
Yeah, I think Dunkley's always rewarded good local members. Peter Murphy was rewarded, and Bruce Bilson, the former Liberal member who held the seat for 20 years, was a very popular figure, and Bruce himself used to talk about the handy to have around factor. It wasn't just that he was a member of Howard's government, that they also thought that as an MP he was handy to have around. So they've always rewarded good members, and Peter Murphy was certainly rewarded the last election. She got a very high primary vote in over 40%, which makes it very easy to get to 50% 2PP. So the challenge for Labor will be to keep the primary vote as close to 40 as possible. The Liberals got 32 primary at the last election here in Dunkley. They last won it on a primary of 42. You'd want to be closer to 45, to be honest.
These days.
Most parties are preferencing against the Liberal Party. Of the 8 candidates, they're only picking up the Libertarians and the Independents on the pre-poll how to vote card preferences. So they really need a strong preference for the Liberal Party. So can they find at least 10 primary points? That's a lot. 32 to 42, that's a lot. And I'd want to be 45, 46. So I find it very hard to get the math together.
Well, so the Liberals, cause have picked the local Frankston mayor, Nathan Conroy. Obviously has a stronger name recognition than than others, but he also carries the baggage of being the mayor, and people don't always love the local council. What do you think of the candidates on offer?
Especially when you consider, I think just recently, council rates went out to all the households.
Right.
So
not great timing.
Not great timing, right? In the middle of affordability crisis, people are, even in our research in this part of Melbourne, are making very, very drastic decisions as to what they pay and what they don't pay. Where we've got situations where people clearly will pay the mortgage, they'll pay the utility bills that they would need to keep the lights on, the internet on, and then they'll just leave the rate notices and other bills on the table and not actually deal with it. So it's not unusual particularly Sydney and Melbourne, for rates arrears to be in excess of 50% of all residents now in these sort of mortgage belt areas.
Well, he and Peter Dutton have gone with a local pitch about train services in the area, keeping it very local. Is that a smart move, Cos?
That's the atypical promise you see from the political class, who don't understand that most people in this part of the world, in the outer suburbs of our large cities, don't catch the train. They drive. And so only about 12-13% will catch the train to work. A very small number. Yes, there are people on the roads that will prefer investment to be put in PT, because for them it means less cars on the road for them to deal with. But it's not a huge vote winner, in my opinion.
It's a good reminder, though, about trust. So I suspect Peter Dutton and the Liberal Party are leveraging off that trust. He's broken his promise on stage 3. He's broken it locally. What next? So trying to reinforce that prejudice or that bias. that this guy is, this is the start of a pattern of behaviour. So from a tactical point of view, but as Cos says, from a service provision point of view, it's less of a vote mover or salient issue.
So what do you expect is going to happen? So the seats held with a margin of 6.3% by Labor. Cos, what's your hot tip?
If Labor loses support in terms of primary votes, which I expect to happen, I expect that most of that will go to minor parties. We're not seeing it.
And then come back, basically.
Partially come back. Enough for them to hold on, unless something drastic happens in those northern parts of the electorate, like Carrum Downs.
So maybe lose 3 or 4%, but still hold the seat.
That's right.
Tony?
Yeah, I think it's going to be very hard for the Liberal Party to win. I think some of the preconditions are there, but we're talking about a massive climb in the primary vote. We also come back to the problem we had in Aston that Peter Dutton's got, is that this is in Victoria, which has brand damage for the Liberal Party, and the Victorian Liberal Party, they'd kill Taylor Swift's career in a month, less than a month if you gave them the chance. So Peter Dutton has survived them already. Can he survive it again? Probably not. In the longer term, because we need, there's 37 seats after the redistribution out of 150. You just can't keep on ignoring Victoria. We've only got 6 seats in Victoria, the Liberal Party. You can't get to 76 seats unless you're competitive in Victoria.
Well, that brings us to what's at stake here, right? Because, you mentioned Aston. That was last year. We were still in the early phase of a new government, and it was an extraordinary result. Labor won a seat from the opposition. Hadn't happened in 100 years. This is a different context. We are now in the back half of the parliamentary term. What is at stake if Peter Dutton can't win this sort of outer metro seat in Victoria, Tony?
Yeah, I think it's more of a Liberal Party problem than a Peter Dutton leader problem. But it is his problem to fix. It's a problem that's been 10 to 15 years in the making. We were saying before we recorded that, in this area, 10 years ago today, the Liberal Party held the seat of Dunkley, and we also held the 4 state seats, Frankston, Carrum, Hastings and Mornington. Today, we have 1 out of 5, and that's Mornington, which we only won by about less than 1%.
It's a good point. It's a Liberal Party problem, but it is also a Peter Dutton problem, isn't it? Because
it's his problem to fix.
Yeah, but he's also identified as his strategy, rather than necessarily winning back those teal seats, picking up seats like this in the outer metro areas.
Yeah, I think it's more about fixing the Victorian division of the Liberal Party, which remains uncompetitive at a state and a federal level. So, every leader has passed the buck. Every state president, every state director over the last 10, 15 years in Victoria has failed spectacularly. So it's not a problem of his making, but he has to fix it, because he's not going to get 76 seats.
If they don't win it, presumably the argument will be, Labor did the tax cut trick, and that was enough to get them through the by-election. It was a popular member who died, and there'll be reasons given. What do you reckon, Cos? Though, should there be a stronger soul-searching moment for the Libs as to whether this is the right strategy they're on?
Just to Tony's point, and that is that the Liberal Party, generally speaking, at a national level, has looked upon Victoria as something they don't need to worry about, because they think it's all full of progressive voters and returns Labor many, many seats. The problem they face is that, based on current projections, Melbourne will be the biggest city in the country within a decade, and so that means more and more seats will be created in this city. And if you do not understand the cultural heart of this city, you're going to be requiring other states to do a lot of heavy lifting to get to that 75 seat majority.
And what about the other way? If Labor loses this seat, Anthony Albanese had a rough end of the year, better start to this year with the changes on stage 3. If he then loses a by-election at the end of February here, what does that mean?
If you're losing a Dunkley in Melbourne and you're the Labor Party, then there are 12 seats under Dunkley that are geographically and demographically more challenging for Labor. Seats like Werriwa in Sydney, Hasluck in Perth, Blair in Brisbane, that are heavily mortgaged, very, very white, and we use diversity as a really important measurement when it comes to whether it's good territory for the Labor Party or not. And a lot more difficult for Albanese.
So will people start to worry if Labor loses here in Dunkley?
Oh, then it's
that they could be heading for a first-term defeat.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think in politics, you're either applying pressure or you're absorbing pressure. And Dutton's has been applying pressure, and Albanese has been absorbing pressure for over 6 months now. And this could be a bit of a circuit breaker. If I think a pass mark is for Albanese is 52, 53 on a 2PP basis win.
Mm-hmm. So a swing against Labor of 3-ish percent.
Yeah, I think that's a pass mark. Anything less than that, and I think he's still absorbing pressure. And we're in a game of momentum in politics, and that means that Dutton is still sort of building that momentum. And I think one thing I've learned in politics, David, over 25 years is that with MPs, they've only got two speeds: ignorance and panic. And I think in this case, if there's a loss, if Labor loses this seat, I think there's going to be a lot of panic in the Labor Party ranks.
Would you agree with that pass mark? What was it, 52 or 53%? Two-party result for Labor is the pass mark.
Just holding onto the seat is a pass mark, in my opinion. If you get down to
squeak
50,
over the line, that's a pass.
Squeak over the line, it's a pass. If you lose the seat and it's in, you lose it by 7-8%, then yes, it's a problem because of the sort of metrics that we touched on before, and that is it is a seat that is situated in a city that's really really good for Labor, but also if you're losing a Dunkley, then seats like Hasluck, Wirral, Blair, all those electorates in other states are definitely on the line.
Well, we will see what happens in just over a week here in Dunkley. Great to talk to you, Tony and Cos. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
Well, it's been lovely spending the day here in Dunkley. We're going to have more conversation, more analysis of what's going on in this by-election on Sunday morning on Insiders. And we'll be back in your feed next week with another Insiders on Background. Thanks for joining us.
You're making us all feel very excited about being here.